Could you tell us a little bit about SEKHEM? Is it the right pronunciation?
Well, the pronunciation of SEKHEM is more, it has a very unique sound that isn't in the English language. It is in the Semitic languages, and it has a more of a ch sound. So it's like SEKHEM, and that's traditionally closer to what it would be said, how it would be said.
But we can pronounce
but it's not in our English alphabet.
Okay.
And most Americans and Europeans are not going to have that in their language as much, and so it's going to be a little harder for them to understand that. So normally I just say SEKHEM.
Okay.
And also it confuses the spelling, which has been sometimes an issue with it. There's the traditional spelling of SEKHEM is SEKHEM. And originally, when I first came in contact with the word, I was spelling it SEICHIM because I didn't understand. It wasn't spelt out to me, and I really didn't know at that time, that there was a historical reference to even SEKHEM in Egypt.
Oh, there wasn't.
No.
Okay.
So that made it rather a unique, discovery at one point. Here I was, using this word SEKHEM, and I had from the experience that I had in the pyramid, and since it was Egyptian, and the first time I came across that was in Robert Master's book. He was discussing Sekhmet. I believe it was the book Goddess, the Goddess Sekhmet. And now he didn't put a lot of emphasis on, as much emphasis on SEKHEM, but at least it triggered something in me to do a little bit more research. And later on, I found that the literal translation for SEKHEM is power of powers.
Oh, okay.
Now it doesn't mean necessarily the power of having power over someone, but it's a very spiritual power. Yes. And so some people might take a little bit. They could take that either in different ways. Because obviously in the spiritual community, when you talk about power, sometimes it can deal a lot with the ego, and this is not really the case. Now, I'm not an Egyptologist or anything, so I don't really know exactly how it was used. I've gone in and I've looked it up in Egyptian encyclopedias, and actually found some other very interesting translations for it, because SEKHEM also relates to a place that was much like a mythical Shambhala, and they refer to it as the dwelling place of the gods.
Oh.
And so it's rather interesting, because that also fits in with some of my experiences with the energy. And one of those major experiences with the energy is that the energy can take on a variety of different forms, what you're most comfortable with. So this also sets up a lot of confusion, because if you've noticed out there now, there's a lot of different forms. You have Isis SEKHEM, you have kind of like almost a Kuan Yin style SEKHEM. You've got people doing even a raw SEKHEM now, and Sekhmet type style SEKHEM. What's going on is that they start to, when they have an experience or an initiation, the way that they feel most comfortable sometimes is connecting it with the god or goddess. And in some cases, it's just a spontaneous thing. I know that Marsha Burek, she had a spontaneous connection with Sekhmet. Now, it was triggered, though, by the fact that someone gave her a Sekhmet pendant.
And an amulet.
Yeah, little amulet, yes. And so once she connected with it and she saw it, it then registered in her mind. And then after that, there was a connection. She had a strong connection with Sekhmet, and other people who have also had strong connections with Sekhmet as well. Helen Bellot has had a very strong connection, and she has that very much embedded in her teachings.
She does the Australian.
Yes, she has an Australian version of it, and she studied with Phoenix, who was also one of my students as well. Yeah, Phoenix Summerfield. Yes. And So what's happened is that because, you know, I've never created a manual or written things out, especially in the beginning, and we're slowly putting all this together. There's been a wide variety of different spellings, different meanings, and everybody interprets it in their own way, which in some ways has been quite good. I mean, it has a very positive aspect in that regard, that people can connect with it in their own way.
So it's not fixed.
And no, and I've been teaching it differently anyway from the.
Yes, because you use a different spelling now. You're using 4 letters instead of this SEICHIM.
Yes, yeah. Well, one of the reasons I decided to, really use the SKHM spelling was because this is the original form, the way they would spell it in the hieroglyphs.
Yes.
Of course, we're putting it in our letters now.
Yes.
Essentially, the hieroglyph is the scepter.
Yes.
You know, the scepter represents SEKHEM.
Yes.
And the reason that it is, it's that it represents the column of light.
Yes.
And so it's connecting heaven and earth down.
Yes.
Bringing those together and in the body. The actual hieroglyphs used is a scepter over it's like a sitting priest. So
very
you can,
spiritual.
yes. So you can actually see the the actual image of the energy moving down.
Yes.
into the human body, and so this
it's about connection with a higher level.
Yes, connecting to source,
Okay.
connecting to a higher source in the sense of we do have a soul, and the soul's then connected to source, and of course that soul is part of who we are already, and a lot of people want to say, well, let's say SEKHEM, or even some of the other systems with the healing, they talk about, well, the energy being outside yourself, and then you're kind of like, you need to have somebody else make the connection for you.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is that we're all connected into that anyway.
So it's just a person connecting to a source themselves.
Yeah.
Without interference of anyone.
Yeah, they may connect. The idea is to invite your soul and bring your soul energy into your body and connect it with that way, and that's usually when an initiation occurs. And we call that a SEKHEM Ket.
Yes.
Mainly because there are so many different terms of initiation now, and people get it all mixed up.
Yes.
So most of the time, there's just this knowing that, okay, you have an initiation and then you have an attunement.
Yes.
And actually they're quite different.
Yes, that's what I read at www.skhm.org. There's a difference between initiation and attunement.
Well, that's in my eyes. Everybody's going to have different things, because some people will call an attunement an initiation.
Yes.
And again, the word initiation has many different forms.
Yes.
Normally, if we just take the example of Reiki, which is a little more well known,
Yes.
just the procedure itself can be called an attunement. When you
So you don't have a procedure which you do.
Well, we have one that we do use. However, initiations can take place at any time. In fact, it's quite regular, even during the introductions in our class, people will go spontaneously into an initiation without me doing anything at all.
So it's not about you.
No.
But tell me a little bit about the experience you had in the pyramid, because it started somewhere.
Well, the pyramid was a major point in my life. It was an initiation in a sense, that I started on a spiritual path. So it's kind of like, usually when you have your first initiation, that's when you first begin that spiritual searching, and that I had on my own, and I began a spiritual search. I looked into a lot of the Eastern religions. Yoga, some meditation.
Yeah.
Studied Kundalini Yoga for a while with Yogi Bhajan, and then also studied some other forms of yoga with some other types of systems. But really focused a lot on the Kundalini Yoga for a while, so that was very important.
Kundalini Yoga is connecting to Earth? Or?
Well, the Kundalini Yoga is a yogic exercise which they deal a lot with what they call the breath of fire. So it's kind of a pranayamic technique. And essentially, by working with the breath, then the Kundalini, which is in the base of the spine, begins to rise up. And then in combination with yogic postures and holding these postures, it just helps the whole process along.
Okay.
Now, be quite honest with you, I studied, it was almost a year with that group. I lived in the ashram for a while.
Yes.
And I spoke to a lot of the people, but most of the people were not really having, what you would think of as pure Kundalini type experiences, but it was a very powerful yoga and system. But it takes years. Those types of things take a lot of time to develop, and a lot of times it's required that requested that you have a teacher.
Yes.
Because some practices, if they're done and they're not done in a natural way, it can actually cause problems for people.
Yes.
And in fact, I even hurt my back doing some yoga. During yoga, yeah. So, these types of things can happen, and also some of the psychological things that can happen with the breathing if you're continuing doing a lot of unnatural type breathing in the body, because they force it, yes. But that's a little bit of my earlier background.
Yes.
And then I joined the Peace Corps, and that was during that time I had a lot of time to meditate on my own.
Yes.
So I did have a lot of preparation before I went into my experience with the pyramid. And in some ways I see it as a pilgrimage.
Yes.
And many people I think do this. You have a goal in your life, because even at a very young age I was very interested in Egypt. Yes. And especially, the architecture of Egypt.
You're an architect.
Yes, I'm an architect, and I would find myself in the library hours on end just looking at the architectural styles, and very much interested in the pyramids. I got Rutherford's whole volume of. He had almost a 10-volume set just of information on the Great Pyramid. And so, I knew everything about it. Yes. I put a lot of energy into it. So when the time came for me to go there, it's just like the whole thing unfolded. I knew that in some ways I had planned it. I had created this event. And so ahead of time, that's where I said, this is where I'm going to start to have an opening. Yeah. And of course, what ended up happening was not really what I expected in the beginning, because there was a very deep fear that I got in touch with. Yes. It went right into the core of my fear and the fear of death. Yes. And I knew at one point during the initiation I had to make a choice between life and death. And
that was in the pyramid.
This was in the pyramid, yes.
So you spent a night in the pyramid? In the tomb?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. And and it was an interesting story. It's been written on the web quite a bit, but to kind of condense the story down a little bit, he's going to sing for us. Yes. We'll have a few jungle sounds here. Yeah. So essentially, the story of the pyramid goes that it was something first that I really wanted to do most of my life, and I had the opportunity to go there on vacation while I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Yemen. So the first thing I did was go to Cairo, and took the bus in, and it's approaching the Giza Plateau. It's very awesome because you just kind of turn the corner and there they are. They're right there. Right. It's not like they're out in the desert or anything. They're like right. You leave the city and then you're right there. And now it is right on the edge of the desert. So once you get to the right of them, it's desert. But then the left or east is all populated. Yeah. So I just did some investigation first, went and did the touristy things at the pyramids, went around and visited them all, and then went into the King's, the Cheops pyramid, Khufu, I believe they call it as well. There's many different names, mainly because the pharaohs had several names. Oh, really? But it was the big one. You kind of go into first the main entrance is where the thieves had carved in. And then they carved in and they met a shaft. There was a shaft that kind of came down. So at first you come in and it's large enough, but then you kind of have to crouch down and you go through these little shafts that have been created. And those were aligned with some of the stars. They lined up with Sirius and
the air shafts.
The air shafts, and then you also had the main shaft, which that one was pointing up north to the actual the main North Star at the time. And of course things have shifted a little bit since then. But they're very much it's an astrological marvel. Again, though, I'm not going to get into all the details because there's many books written on that. Peter Tompkins has some good books on it. But essentially, after going in, went up into the Queen's Chamber, and it just felt really, most people that go on the pyramid, it's just an awesome experience. First, just to be there.
Yes.
And then, going up to the King's Chamber, it was almost like I'd always been there before. I'd, read about it and dreamed about it, and then, got to the top of the Grand Gallery, and then onto the King's Chamber where you go in, and I saw the sarcophagus, and it's the sound acoustics in it is just amazing. As you walk, you can just hear the vibrations, and then another interesting thing is that the sarcophagus itself, which is solid granite, you can hit it, and it actually does a very nice ohm.
Oh.
And it's like a big bell. And so for hitting rock and getting a bell sound, it's pretty amazing. But on my way out of it, I looked down, and there's when I'm coming out of the King's Chamber, I looked down, and there's a little door, and this is where the thieves had tried to carve up around the granite casing that was around the King's Chamber. They didn't, of course, know what was. They thought that they could go up over the wall, but when they got up there, it was also granite. So then they came down, and then they pretty much, I think, just broke through the granite, which was harder to do. But they left this little passageway that went up off to the side, and then kind of up above the King's Chamber just slightly. Of course, the Egyptians, they had then put a little wooden door there to keep tourists and everybody out of that. It was only about this big,
Very small.
It's a little kind of a little crawl space, and then they had a little door there. And I looked down, and there wasn't a lock there. And now I had brought some money along because I was going to, if I needed to, I could pay one of the guards or somebody, there all the time wanting to, a little bit of backsheesh or something, and I had already been to the top of the pyramid, and, you pay them $5 and they kind of let you go up. And that's kind of, so my intention is that just to ask somebody, what I could do to spend the night, because that's really wanted to do. Now, being a Peace Corps volunteer, of course, I don't have a lot of resources, and didn't have a lot of money at the time. And just a little voice, says, look at that, there's something with that. And the gate, there was a lock, but it wasn't clamped. And so, it just, I kind of just opened it, and I looked in, and I shut it again, and I said, well, I think this is what I'll do. And there was, just this energy that was guiding me to do that as well. And so the next morning, I prepared. I fasted the rest of the day, and I prepared just a little bag with a few essential items, and went in. And early in the morning, with the first tour group, when they went down, I just went up into that shaft. And I had no idea what was up there.
No.
I mean, there could have been scorpions. There could have been all kinds of things. And all I had was this little flashlight, and I crawled up in there, and it was mostly just dust. And crawled up, and I sat there and I meditated most of the day. And you could hear the different people coming and going and everything. And I waited till evening, and it was about, I guess, 6 or 7 o'clock that finally the last tour group left, and I could hear them even shut and clang. The gate was shut. And so I knew that I was in. Okay, and so step one, there I was, and I was a bit nervous because I knew that what I was doing was illegal. I mean, if somebody found me, I definitely could have been arrested. But I just felt that this was something that I really needed to do. It was something that I had dreamed about and had visions of doing. And And, in a sense, I'm not there to just disrupt the monument or cause any damage. And so my being there is really not going to hurt anybody. No. But legally, yes, there could have been some very serious complications if I was to be found. And,
prison maybe.
So so I mean, I was quite nervous, about that. And after they shut the gate, I waited a bit, and it seemed quiet, and so I came down and I went into the king's chamber, and sat and meditated.
Mm-hmm. Did you had an idea what you were going to do there?
Well, I was just going to meditate.
I meditated.
I was just going to meditate, and I wanted to lie in the sarcophagus. Yes. I had read that Alexander did it, Napoleon had done it, and both of them had just incredible experiences. And there's even a rumor that Jesus did it.
Oh, really?
Who knows? Yeah. I mean, of course, Jesus did many things. I mean, he was in Egypt for a while.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
But there's no historical reference to that. But there was historical reference to Napoleon. Definitely, he had a very strong fascination with Egypt, even though he did incredible amount of damage there. But it was just something that I felt really drawn to do. I knew that would be a major time in my life.
Yes.
And so, I went and I was sitting and I was doing my meditation. It was just simply doing a kind of a vipassana type meditation, just being very still, watching my breath and feeling. And immediately, I started hearing a buzzing sound, which is... at one point I was doing some sound meditation, and so I could get into the sound current very easily. But sometimes it would take several days meditation in order for me to get to that point. But this just happened instantaneous. It was kind of like a sound, very kind of high pitched, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, because things are happening so quickly. I mean, much more quick. It was just like instantaneous. I'm right into the sound, and so as I began to meditate with that, I realized that it was mosquitoes buzzing in my ears, and the sound being in the pyramid, they didn't sound like mosquitoes in the beginning, but when I felt them nibbling, and I became this this blood sacrifice. That I knew that that I had to probably I should do something about it, because one thing that I love traveling. I love going to very exotic places, but I really don't like the bugs. And so here I was being chewed on with these mosquitoes, and I really didn't prepare for this, because the books that I had read had said that a lot of these forms of life didn't live in the pyramid because of the energy. And so I was really shocked. But obviously rain had gotten in there, and somehow they had breeding, and I guess they would feed off the tourists when they would come in.
Maybe. The tourists would maybe take them with them.
Yeah, and brought them in. I have no idea, But anyway, they were in there, and so I gave my blood sacrifice, but it was just getting to be a little distracting for me, so I thought, I did bring a nice roll of toilet paper and and of course a plastic bag in case something had to release while I was in the pyramid. I did come prepared, and so and also toilet paper is an absolute essential in the Middle East, because they don't have it there. At least in their toilets. Yes. But anyway, we won't get into that.
No.
But so I took the toilet paper, and I wrapped myself up so that the mosquitoes could not bite me. And so
that's interesting.
So here I am. I'm sitting in their sarcophagus, and I'm all wrapped up now in toilet paper. Like a mummy. And and I really didn't even think about that in the beginning, but now I look back and it's funny. So I'm sitting there, and I'm all wrapped up with the toilet paper, and then I decided that it was time for me to lie down. And meditate lying down, because I do meditate lying down quite often, and just relax. And I had set my watch. I have a nice timer on my watch, that I had it set for around 6 o'clock, so that it would go off and
before the first tours.
Before they'd come in. And so I lied down, and as soon as I would lie down in the sarcophagus, and I fit in there absolutely perfectly, top of my head down to my feet. Now, of course, the pharaohs were much smaller, and you have to remember the sarcophagus was only the outer casing to hold. Then they had like a casket inside. So But I fit absolutely perfect in it. And, it's kind of in a north-south type orientation there. Yeah. And as soon as I laid down and I started getting comfortable and began the meditation, all of a sudden I heard this sound. It just went boom, 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 boom. Oh. And I'm going like, well, and it was coming from where the gate was. So the first thing I thought was people are coming in. And I mean, they do rent out the King's Chamber for the evening. So I thought, who knows, maybe Paul Horn was going to come back, play his flute. I had no idea. It was scheduled for something possibly. So I thought, I'm lying there, and I was actually kind of frozen.
Yes.
A bit, and here I am, all wrapped up in the toilet paper, and in the sarcophagus, and people are coming, and so I felt this wave of fear come over me. Like, oh gosh, I'm gonna get caught. I knew that I needed to get up and get back to my hiding place, but if I did,
maybe you would be seen.
Well, I might be seen, but keep in mind that they did turn the lights out. It was absolute pitch black,
so you don't see.
And so I didn't see anything, but. And that's what caught my attention. I said, well, now if that's people coming in, they would have turned the light on. And the darkness was just absolutely, there's no light. It was absolutely pitch, nothing. And so my mind, goes down, and I'm saying, well, now there's nobody turning the light on, so it can't be a person.
No.
And I could hear it getting closer.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And then I thought, well, I knew that there were bats in the pyramid. I thought maybe it's just the bats and maybe the bat droppings or something like that making this sound, because every sound would resonate.
Yes, amplified.
Every sound was amplified, and I thought, well, it's bats, it's got to be this, and my mind is just kind of starting to race, and I could feel the fear level in me starting to grow, and I was getting a little more anxious about it, and I just totally focused on the sound, yet I was kind of frozen. Even if I wanted to get up, I couldn't have. And I also knew, well, the best thing for me to also do would just be to stay put. Yeah. And so I just laid there, and I'm all wrapped up, and so they whatever it was coming up, and I could actually hear it coming up the Grand Gallery. Coming closer. And it sounded exactly like footsteps coming, like boom, boom, getting closer and closer and closer, and it was coming up and up. And as it got closer, of course, my level of fear started to get a little stronger, and the energy in my body started to move, and my breathing, started to change, and it would get closer. And then when I started to perceive that it was actually coming into the King's Chamber, that's when I realized that, well, it's not human, it's not animal, it's got to be some sort of spiritual force.
Yes.
And at that point, again, I took another huge leap in, needing to use the toilet paper. So, and it was interesting. I've been in a lot of fearful situations. They had people point their guns at me and threaten their life. Yeah, and so I've really, I've even kind of hung off of cliffs before, without any tether on me. So I mean, I've experienced fear before, but this was a different kind of a fear. It was very deep, and it went very deep into my core, and I really, I didn't understand the fear at all, because it was something new to me, and it was like, well, in some ways, this is what I've come here for.
Yes.
But that fear kept getting stronger, and the sound would get closer, and I could feel it coming closer and closer. And of course, the sarcophagus had its sides. Yeah. So I mean, even if I could see something, which it was complete dark, I wouldn't be able to, because I was down inside the sarcophagus. And then I could feel it was just like I knew there was this energy presence right next to me, standing next to me, and a lot of things went through my head. It was like, well, okay, is it the spirit of the Pharaoh? And it was kind of like I felt kind of wow, here I am, I'm in your place.
Yes.
And So, but a lot of things were coming through and clearing for me, and then all of a sudden I started to see this light. And it was like an electrical blue, electrical blue light, beautiful, and it was like hovering above me, and it had the form of like a multi-dimensional infinity, and it was just kind of just going, it's kind of a, but it just didn't go like this. It was just going
all over, like a sort of
many different, almost like a flower, a little bit like you see the Merkaba. Drawings and things, and it was just kind of, it was above me, and it was kind of, pulsing, and my fear level was getting stronger, and it was coming closer to me, and I realized at that point that I could die.
Yes.
And it was like I felt like I was on the edge of life and death because of the fear.
Yes.
And at that point, I realized, okay, I could die, and then my other part of myself comes in and says, well, this is what you came here for, And soon as that part of myself said, this is what you came here for, I just said, well, I might as well just allow whatever needs to happen. So I just allowed it to happen, opened up, and this energy just kind of, it just like whoop, came right into my heart. And when it did, all the cells in my body started to vibrate, and I could feel this kind of peace. Yes. It wasn't fear at all anymore. It was like the fear just vanished. It was like I broke through the fear.
Yes.
And I felt this connection.
Yes.
And I felt this love.
That's beautiful.
And then at that point, I realized the whole time that this sound was actually my heart.
Yes, the thumping of your heart. Your heartbeat.
And yeah.
But how could it be coming closer, because it began to pump harder or something?
Well, when there's many things going on in the pyramid itself, but it was almost like the whole sound was projected, and my awareness was projected, and there are claims, they don't want people spending the night there a lot of times because
people get crazy there.
There has been situations, at least I've heard rumors, that even people have died. But now I don't know. I haven't checked it, but I have heard that, and so there was definitely a energy that was in there that that somehow I connected with, but it was actually part of me, and this is what was I think a little people kind of misunderstand at times. At first, you see, it appeared to be outside myself.
Yes.
But once I connected with it, it was actually an energy that was part of who I am. And the whole experience of going through my fears brought me to that realization that this is just something of that it's just part of me.
Okay.
And it was one of the more powerful experiences in my life.
I can imagine.
And when I was laying there, then I realized, almost before I knew it, my alarm was going off.
So it was time.
It was time to get up, and then I had to go, and it was just like the time just flew by. And I went back into my hiding place, and the tour group started to come in then later, and then it was about a little before noon, 10, 11-ish. I came out of my hiding place, and I noticed, and it was interesting because I wore a lot of the Egyptian clothing.
Yes.
I had a kind of Egyptian robe on. It was white,
but
I noticed that there was this white. I was just covered in this white powder, and so I brushed it off as good as I could, and then joined the tour group. And I'm walking out, and the guards start yelling at me, and I understood what they were saying because I do know a bit of Arabic, and they wanted me to come back, and I just kept walking, and the buses come very close to the pyramid, so I just kind of walked very quickly, hopped on a bus. It was just pulling out, and I got on, and got back to the hotel. I escaped, because I didn't need to have any questions,
No.
But I know why they were calling me now. Because when I got home and I looked in the mirror, I was completely white. It was just like somebody had taken this white powder. It was kind of a silvery white powder. And it was in my hair. I had a long beard, and I had fairly long hair then. I actually had hair. And that's when it started to open.
And you lost your hair.
But I was just covered in this white powder.
Yes.
And I didn't think about that much of it at the time. But later on, I've been told that they've been doing some testing, and they found that there is this kind of white kind of most interdimensional dust or whatever in
really?
in the pyramid, and actually, it may have helped with the whole experience. So in a sense, I was breathing in the pyramid. I had actually connected with the pyramid itself because it has this dust,
yes.
In it.
Do you think that the dust appeared because of the experience?
No, it's there all the time.
It's there all the time.
It's there all the time. Yeah. It's just part of of the pyramid.
So, and this experience led you to do what?
Well, after the experience, that's when I went back to the hotel. I cleaned up, and I was just sky high. Just jumped. It was just incredible. I couldn't believe that I had done it, and then just the energy itself was just incredible. And it's interesting. You have an experience like that. But what I tell people in class is like, I didn't get a manual with how to, know anything or understand what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of magically, this woman comes up to me and says, "Hi, I'm looking for a Sufi, and can you help me find him?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, okay." And she through her suggestion, I found this Sufi group there, and it was rather interesting because a lot of the things that they were teaching connected with my experience in the pyramid.
Oh, yes.
And this is where the all love comes in, because they work with their heart center.
Yes.
And actually it's more of the heart center up here.
Spiritual heart.
Yes. And they have a very beautiful dance, and this is one of the things that we do in the class as well. So but I connected very strongly with this group of Sufis. They live right in the old city. They have a little center there.
Yep.
And their main teacher used to live in the Sudan, down in Khartoum. And this woman wanted to go visit him. And after we spent a few days with them, which under their recommendation, they actually gave us both airplane tickets.
Oh, really?
It's just amazing,
Yes.
the generosity.
Yes.
He gave us 2 airplane tickets. We went to Khartoum, and we went to visit the head of their order, which his name was Osman Burhani. And while I was there, he would go and he would have a visitor. You'd go visit him, and he would do some teachings, and I'd go over to him every day, and I didn't realize it, but normally, people were saying, well, he just doesn't do that for everybody individually.
Oh.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. And they do have, their Sufi. I don't really want to call it again, the word initiation is a little bit misleading, but they have a little ceremony that they go through.
Yes.
And they give you a string of beads, and then he gives you kind of a mantra. Now I'm using the Hindu term because I can't remember what they call it in Arabic. But they have their own way of doing it. They'll take the beads, and what the sheikh will do is, there's obviously a transmission going on. But to be quite honest with you, when I was with him, I didn't understand this connection with gurus and things like that. I was with Yogi Bhajan and really even didn't get it with him. Because I really, part of me was a bit resistant to the whole guru type of thing. Yeah. And but he ended up, he gave me this mantra, and essentially it was a very simple one. It was just saying Allah.
Allah.
And I didn't think much of it, In fact, I have a letter that's on the web, and I wrote home, and I, told my parents, well, I didn't really learn anything new from them.
Yes.
The pyramid experience was absolutely incredible, but I'm not going to tell my parents exactly what happened because they would get a little scared if they knew. So I toned the whole thing down. But really, the things that the sheikh had to teach me was stuff that I'd read before. It wasn't anything new. No. But I stuck with what he, I said, well, it's a simple teaching. And so I tried it. And I worked with this Allah, and I would, I had the beads, and I had to do it so many times a day. And I was having some very wonderful experiences with it. Now, of course, with the pyramid experience and then with the Sufi experience, it was kind of hard because I had them both so quickly next to each other. It's really hard to distinguish what was doing what.
Yes.
But I felt they worked together.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I had the initiation in the pyramid, and then I had the teachings on how to support the initiation, the techniques, to support that from the Sufis.
Yes. And did they, because you mentioned the name infinity.
Yes.
Did they use that?
They did not use any specific symbols.
No.
However, the main thing is that they were a Sufi group that and normally you think of Sufis that dance and they go in the spiral.
The zikr dance.
They do the zikr dance.
Dervish.
The dervish dance. They go in circles. But what they would do, they would swing their bodies in an infinity pattern.
Form. Yes.
And so you do that, but they didn't ever say you do the infinity pattern.
No, it's just what
but as I began to do it, my body would naturally go into this infinity pattern, and it would stay focused in the heart. So this was really key because it kind of supported the whole initiation of the heart forming.
Yes.
And it kind of like helped bring it up and help me keep it. And before long, I was like having incredible experiences, vivid dreams, out-of-body experiences, and all the stuff that you read about. Yeah. And I hadn't really had that before. As strongly. I was getting into lucid dreaming a lot, which lucid dreaming is when you wake up in your dream.
Okay.
And those were very, very powerful.
Yes.
But this was very different. It was like one day, one evening, I just was awake and I was on my ceiling.
Yeah.
And it was I read Robert Monroe's book, Out of the Body book. It was a classic, and it was like this is what was happening to me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could fly around, and then you'd have to learn how to actually get out and pass through walls. And the first time I tried it, I tried to go through a wall, and as I went into the wall, I came out and I was in a sawmill. I could hear this buzzing going zzz, and I go like, well, what am I doing here? And then I realized that I actually went into the memory of the wood that was being cut. But I started to notice these things. Yes. But one of the most important things that I noticed that was happening is that when I would get ill, I'd take my hands and I could put them on my body.
Yes.
And this vibration that I experienced when I was in the pyramid would just start.
Oh, okay.
And it would just, it would just start to happen.
Yeah.
And so it was something, and of course traveling and getting dysentery and stuff like this a lot, and you pick up stuff. Yes. I found that it was very useful for me when I was traveling.
Sort of healing.
Yeah, yeah. And but again, I had no manual.
No.
And the Sufis didn't heal that way. They dealt a lot more with their herbs and things. So it wasn't like I had a teacher or anything.
No.
And it really wasn't until I was in Nepal, because after I finished my Peace Corps and my 2 years that I spent in the Yemen, then I went to Nepal for 2 years, and I stayed there. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I was there that I took like a massage class, and actually started to be able to touch people and have my hands on other people, and something just shifted in me, and I had my experience. My education was all in architecture.
Yes.
But at that moment, I knew that I would be, doing more healing work, and so I knew that when I came back, I wanted to do more body work and healing. Mm-hmm. So after my time with Nepal, I went and I studied with Robert Chamberlain. Robert Chamberlain March was his name, and he had a school. It was called New Mexico Healing Academy of Healing Arts, and he was a very big inspiration. He was a disciple of Shiri Chimoy. I'm not sure if the pronunciation is correct, but he's a very very well-known Indian guru, and very scientifically minded, very musically gifted, and that was very impressive. And Robert had a strong connection with him, and he had created this school. And it was also with a man named Dr. Shear, who is a very big healer in New Mexico, and had actually 3 or 4 schools that he had sponsored. But that was very grounding, because I learned a wide variety of techniques: hypnotherapy, the body work. Energetic healing, and it was also there that I had learned Reiki. In fact, he wasn't doing Reiki or teaching Reiki, but his girlfriend had taken Reiki. And it was kind of an interesting relationship because, he had had all this experience and she really didn't have too much experience with this. And so she had just taken this Reiki course, and Robert really wasn't so much interested in that, interested in the Reiki. He was a healer in himself. He was confident in his healing abilities. But it was rather interesting because his girlfriend offered me to do a session. Yeah. And I had a lot of people work on me, and she had just taken her Reiki 1, and she put her hands on me, and when she put her hands on me, it was very similar to when I would put my hands on me, and it was the first time I felt that kind of connection. Yes. Yes. And so I said, "What is this that you're doing?" Because you're the first person that I've met, which has a kind of an energy that I've been able to use, since Egypt. Yeah. And so she says, well, it's called Reiki, and there's a woman that she's coming into to do a class, and it's like in a week or two. Her name was Marilyn Alvey. And so I said, well, I'm going to do the course. Yeah. And so I did Reiki 1 and 2 that weekend, and to be quite honest with you, it was a good, it was a good course, but it was very basic, and a lot of the information was stuff that I'd already known, and I was a little disappointed in some things. Energetically, I had the I did have the Reiki attunements, and I did have a good experience with the second degree. The very vivid dreams. I actually, that night after my attunement, I had put a little fluorite crystal under my pillow. Yes. And right after that attunement, I woke up inside the crystal. It was like I heard this buzzing sound, but this time it wasn't mosquitoes, but it was actually the atomic structure of the crystal. And so it really, and interesting if you know anything about fluorite, they're the shape of 2 pyramids. Oh yeah, it's a point. Yeah. Oh. And that's the reason that I really liked that crystal, because it reminded me of the pyramid, and there was like this connection, and also it was the color. Yes. It was the kind of electric blue. Oh yes. And so I woke up inside with it, and it's like I connected directly with that crystal.
So maybe the shape or form or
many different things, but a lot just my intention. Just the intention of alone, putting it there along with the Reiki. So I said, well, this is the closest thing to what I was doing, so I really wanted to continue with it. And so I did some research, and I found that Barbara Ray was doing she was doing a master's. She was the one teaching at the time. I really didn't know the whole structure or anything about it other than what was taught in the class. And at that time, Barbara Ray was supposed to have been the head person teaching it. She had the book out. Yeah. And so I said, well, this is what I want to do. Of course, it was $10,000 at the time. Yes. And it's rather interesting. At that time, my grandfather had given me an advanced inheritance of $5,000. Wow. And it just so happened that Barbara was saying, well, we'll do she broke the masters down into 2. She says, A and B. The A and B type of thing. Yeah. Essentially, you get everything, but you just had to say that you weren't going to be teaching Reiki. You had to wait until you paid the other $5,000. Yes, yeah. So I said, well, I don't care to teach, so much, and so I just want to understand how this works, and so it was interesting. I went, and I don't want to kind of get into the, I have to admit there was some disappointment because of the whole money issues and things like this, and the structure around that. And when I came out of the course, I really, I just felt like that there was definitely something missing there. And mostly it was just the energy. I think that it was around the structure of the guru type mentality almost, and Reiki master, and I knew that if I was to teach something, it wouldn't be along this way. But I liked it. I liked what I had
Yes.
with the symbols and everything,
Yes.
and I worked with the symbols for a while, and then pretty soon working with the symbols, or some of the symbols, I just wasn't comfortable with that either.
Yeah.
And I did some research, and it was interesting because I immediately found a very good Japanese dictionary, and was able to really find out what these symbols were all about.
Yeah.
Now, what was interesting was in the teachings with the Reiki, they were trying to say they were Tibetan, and coming
really?
from India, I knew
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
weren't, and I immediately found the Japanese.
Writings. Chinese writings.
Yeah.
Japanese writing. Yeah.
And so I actually worked with the symbol behind the symbol.
Yes.
A good example of this is with Daikomyo.
Yeah.
I would just visualize the light.
Great shining.
It's a great light, rather than drawing it out in Japanese, because essentially the Japanese was limited by the brush strokes.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're trying, essentially the great shining light and everything was just simply and basically a representation of a brilliant light. And this is something that I was experiencing in some of my meditations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fairly certain that whoever, whether it was a Sui or somebody before a Sui, when they begin to create this is what the representation which they're
Yes,
doing.
it's maybe a translation for something like symbol.
Yeah, well, it's just like in English, if we were to write it out, we would say, we would have to write it out, great shining light. Well, would they look at our writing and consider that sacred?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you look at it, but if you look at our writing, it doesn't represent
No.
what the image would be like. Now, Japanese is a little different because you would get
It's a drawing.
it was like a little sketch.
Yeah.
And if you look at the old Chinese styles, it actually was a circle in the beginning.
Yeah,
A circle with this.
the Myo is the sun and moon
Yeah,
together.
the sun and moon, the two greatest lights that we can see.
Yes.
Also representing, like maybe even the male, female, and those two lights
Yes,
coming
being
together,
young, yeah.
being one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of spiritual representation of that, and again, there are experts on that, and I don't pretend to even be an expert.
No.
I got in a discussion one time with a Reiki master who had studied this, and of course,
You're wrong.
Yes. But yeah, this is my personal thing. I mean, even like if you look at the Seiheki, which is like a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
To me, like essentially it's saying repeat,
Yes.
repeating over again. Now I have found sources from Dave King saying that he's one of the people that studied this quite intensely. That it was a Sanskrit symbol at one time.
Hari.
But if you look at the meaning, it's kind of like repetitive motion. Seiki's, it's taking the mental and making a pattern of it. So if you practice this over and over again, essentially that's what one of the basic meanings of the Seiki is. It's like to repeat, to keep doing. Then what happens is that then if you keep the practice, then you will receive your reward.
Yes.
And in some ways, the Seiki, not the symbol, but the words, which I found in a small dictionary, represented originally was a bow and arrow, like pull, because you're pulling back and letting go, pulling back, and you're doing this repeating. And you can actually, if you wanted to, you could actually see it in the symbol. I don't know if there's a relationship in it or not, but it's just bringing back that awareness into your heart.
Yes.
And so, to me, the whole thing with the Reiki was essentially just it was a formula to just bring your awareness with all your heart and bring the light in there. And so, from that alone and the experience that I had in the pyramid, I began to, when I would do initiations, I would work with the light.
Yes.
And I started to eliminate, basically the Reiki. And I really didn't even practice the Reiki but a few months.
Yes.
Before it just started to develop this, and I just allowed it to flow with the energy.
So it just gave you a sort of starting point to share this, or?
Yes, and I was very fortunate because at the time, I moved from Santa Fe and then I went to California.
Mm-hmm.
In Garberville, and they had another healing school. I went there specifically to study with David Quigley, who does a wonderful process called alchemical hypnotherapy.
Sorry?
Alchemical.
Alchemical. Oh, alchemical.
Hypnotherapy. Who does wonderful work, past life regressions and things like this, and I was very impressed with him and spent almost a year studying with him. And so while I was there, I had the opportunity to work with many people, and I started to share. And while I was there, I met a lady named Christine Gerber, and she did some channeling. And through that channeling, that was again a very important event in my life. And she channeled a being called Marat. And I had questions about Reiki, and I had questions about what I was doing, and what came out was that she says, well, you're not really doing Reiki, you know, and I kind of knew that myself, mainly because I was doing the healing before I even came in contact with Reiki. And so it was interesting. So, well, what am I doing? And the channeling she did was a little archaic, you know. She had a Ouija board, actually. And it was rather interesting because I've never seen anybody do the Ouija board so quickly. It was just like, and she would just say the words, and make sentences out of it. And it reminded me a little bit of a technique that they used in Nepal, where the trance channelers would, what they would do is they would repeat words. And the words made no sense at all. But there would be somebody who would then pick up the first letter of every word that would be said, and then they would spell out the message. And so there's many different ways to get information, and this is the way Christine made the connection. And essentially, Marat gave us a whole formula for doing an initiation.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it was it was like he read my mind, essentially, because I mean, essentially he connected with me, and essentially what we were writing out was very, very similar to what I was already doing. There were a few other things that he did add, which actually I really don't even do anymore. But
which are?
one of the things was that we after you do the initiation, you would clap. Above the top of the head. And of course the person would get a real jolt. Working with the energy is very grounding when that would happen. The process and what she had to say was very important. And the name, though, this is where, you know, because I say, well, if this is a kind of a system that's been used before, what is, you know, what is it? And so she channeled it out, and because I think mainly because the alphabet didn't include the letters, she spelt it SETIM. SETIM. And of course we wrote it down. I'm going like, that's not right, you know. And I asked her again, check it again, and there was some difficulty there. You know, she even indicated that, well, it's something that really can't be spelled out, because, you know, there just wasn't some right. So I said, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to meditate on it. And when I went back and I meditated on it, this is where the SEKHEM came in. And of course, again, I didn't have a spelling for it. Okay. And so this is where some of the you know, I was teaching people. I taught a guy named I taught Christina. I taught my girlfriend at the time, who was Lark, was eventually my wife. And then I taught Tiom, and I actually just did it just for free or donation. And Tiom was also wanting to be a Reiki master at the time, and so this is really where a lot of the Reiki started to bond with what we were doing, because it happened so spontaneously with it, you know, simultaneously. And then he taught some people, and one of the ladies that Tiom taught was Phoenix Summerfield. Now, her name at the time was Kathleen McMasters. Yes. And she had a very strong connection with the energy, and began teaching it. And then she eventually contacted me a bit later. I kind of disappeared for a while because I went back to the Sudan, and so nobody knew how to contact me. In fact, Kathleen's friend had told her that I was dead. You know, so and then I ended up during my travels, I lost my contact book, and so I lost contact with a lot of people. And but eventually, Kathleen did contact me again, and she said, "Oh, you know, I just love what we're doing," and you know, I was very supportive of her. and so I encouraged her to teach, and she asked me, she says, well, she wanted to really kind of know, were you, going to be the guru of this and everything. I said, look, I don't really need to be a part of it, in that sense. This is something that everybody connects with it themselves, and if you feel guided to do anything with the energy, you teach it, and you teach it the way that you feel most comfortable. Yes. I don't have a manual for you to follow,
So from there on, they developed it themselves.
Well, yes, she began to then have visions of different symbols, and in some ways I was a little disappointed because her and Tiom were coming up, and every symbol that they could find they would add to the system. I think Tiom at one time had 32 symbols, and Kathleen, was getting symbols, and and I knew in my heart this isn't what it was about. No. And they started to charge. I mean, she was charging over $1,000 for each of these symbols. And I did talk to her about that, and I said, well, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with all this level work and facets and all, but it's working for you. You go ahead. You continue with, and God, you do it the way that you wish. Yeah. And really, that's what started to formulate at that time what SEKHEM was about. Yeah.
Now, this still was a system where they did initiations, sort of.
Well, what they did is that because they were very comfortable with the Reiki, they did the Reiki first. Oh, okay. And then they said, now we're going to give you the more advanced work, which was the SEKHEM.
Yeah.
And they separated it out. I've never separated it. No, never.
But you taught it as a whole system.
Well,
did you teach it the same way Tiam and Phoenix did?
Well, the way that I would originally teach it is that I really connected more with taking, and I did like the form that the Reiki had, where you worked with the symbols, but I didn't use the symbols so much. I used the visualizations of the sun, bringing it down in, and in the heart. Now, maybe the first few ones when I taught Tiom, I did, and one of the things that was confusing was with the information that Christina and Murat had given me. He talked about things like breath of life. Yes. And I didn't know what the breath of life was. No. And so, instead of the breath of life, we used, like the Honchise Shonin symbol and things like that. So there was a connection with it. And then later on, I began to realize and it began to connect with really what was being said through my own personal experience.
Yes. So it evolved a little bit more.
Yeah, and for instance, I realized that the breath of life is actually the Ankh. But in merging and bringing together the that golden sun, the brilliant sun, and bringing it down to earth and connecting it with the cross. So the sun and the circle represents the heaven, the cross representing the earth, being the body. And you bring those two together.
In the center.
Yeah. And so this is more of the form that I currently work with. But like I said, initiations happen if I do anything or not. Yes.
It's not really dependent. That's what we just said before. It's not really depending on you. More that you guide the person in opening up, or because you do use a lotus or a flower.
We with meditation. The head. In the head we open up the flower in the crown to start to bring in. So it's more of a visualization, and it's allowing the person to do it all on their own. Yes. And we've had just incredible experiences with this. People have gone to the website, and all they do is they see our what we call the Shenu, which is kind of like the symbol of how the energy works. And it's a representation of how the whole process works. Yes. And I don't want to use the word symbol because it's the word symbol's I think been a little bit misunderstood. And so we use the word Shenu. And the Shenu, which essentially it's an older version of the word cartouche, which means that's
the French word for
that which encircles and that which holds and represents. And Diane Shoemaker, was instrumental in helping come up with that. We were actually on the phone one day, and I said we need to have a word for this. Yes. And I said I'm not comfortable with using symbol, and she happened to have an Egyptian dictionary there at the time, and I said it's kind of like because we had like the circle that was going around it, and I said, see, it's kind of like a cartouche. And, I mentioned, I said, I said it'd be kind of like the word cartouche, except I don't like the word cartouche. Yes. And so she looked up that, and then when she looked up cartouche, she says, "Oh, look, there's another name for cartouche. It's Shenu." And I said, "That's it. That's it."
Good.
Yeah. And so with the collaboration with many different people, many things have also been forming with it. And Diane was very instrumental. Phoenix was very instrumental in this. Marcia Burak, all added to it. And then of course we have other offshoots, and this connects very strongly with what I have found with the energies. Is that the energy will come with whatever you're most comfortable with. I didn't have a lot of physical images come to me, but what would come would be a brilliant light, and sometimes a voice would be connected with that. But it wasn't really a voice, it was almost like information being channeled or downloaded. So it didn't have the form, but what was interesting is that the information that I got is that the form, the energy could take on whatever you're most comfortable with. So
because that's what you understand and are able to open up for.
And it's just like some people in my class have connected very strongly with Jesus because they're Christians. And I had one lady who was a Hare Krishna, and she connected, and she had the most powerful experience in her life with Krishna.
So it's a sort of belief system, or a belief that triggers the energy. You use the meditation to make a connection.
Yes, you make the connection, and then you see when you make the connection, the energy is going to take on the form that you're comfortable with. So it may be angels.
Yes.
I mean, there's been a whole system of angel Reiki that's been developed, essentially because the person was more connected with angels.
Okay.
And currently, Christine and Beverly Odell are writing a book. Specifically from the angels. And a lot of this was, of course, based, on what we were doing, and it's essentially whatever you want to focus on. So if a person wanted to take the energy and then assign a certain deity or angel or whatever to it, then it'll start to take on that form. And in the same sense, you could take it and break it down into elements. And then experience elements like earth, fire, air, and this happens. Now, I don't tend to do that. I don't like to break it down as much. I just allow whatever comes through to come in and to happen. But I mean, all of these things are possible. It's many different people have found different things to do with the energies. And yes, it's different from the way I teach. But that's really the beauty of the SEKHEM energy.
No real fixed.
No.
You don't use degrees? I mean, you do work.
No, there are I think different levels of initiation that come in, but I don't want to get into that because then people are all the time coming to you. Well, what degree are you? How high am I in the ladder?
Masters.
So what I do is I do recommend taking 3 courses. But a person can become a teacher really, on an energy level, just after, I think you even had an experience just going, getting the Shenu.
Looking at the Shenu, reading your meditation, which you said really happened. It's like this.
Yeah, it can be instantaneous.
In bed.
Yeah.
Really just reading it.
Yeah. I know.
That's true.
So, coming into the class, what it does is it helps ground it.
Yes.
And bring it in and make it real. And so we encourage you to come to classes, and we also want to have you do some like follow-up work to actually kind of like become more certified in the system.